The great worldwide political experiment continues to play out. This is how each individual governments choose to combat coronavirus. Sooner or later, we will find out who were the high IQ governments, who were the low IQ governments, and which were the governments which just chose to take the advice of some other third party. Generally, this is just listening to the China Health Organization. Did I say China? I should have said world. I'll have to edit that out. Anyway, let's take a look at what is going on in the world. So in the UK, we've had the lockdown extended from Politics Home, Dominic Raab. UK coronavirus lockdown will remain in place for at least another 3 weeks. We've had this Mad Cat MP coming out saying this from The Independent. No UK lockdown exit until vaccine found, says Tory Minister Nadine Dorries. Now, this is crazy because the vaccine is going to be almost certainly over a year away, probably about 18 months away. Anybody that tells you it's going to be sooner is probably either just trying to promote their own research. They've got some PhD work, they've done a research paper, and they just want to get that hyped up in the media. Or they own a lot of shares in some pharmaceutical penny stock company and just want to create a lot of hype around it so they can get a 100x return on it. Anybody that tells you it's coming September, I don't believe it. Love it if it came September, but it's probably not. It's probably going to be over a year away. People that tell you otherwise, they're just promoting research or they're just trying to pump some penny stock. So MP Nadine Dorries has said journalists should stop asking about an exit strategy as the only way out of the UK's coronavirus lockdown is by finding a vaccine, which may or may not even be possible. We don't know. The Minister for Patient Safety, Suicide Prevention and Mental Health, which is all very ironic because the lockdown is going to increase suicide almost certainly. It is going to increase the prevalence of mental health almost certainly. If you lock people in their houses for months on end, what do you think is going to happen? People kill themselves. People have mental breakdowns. It only makes sense. But she's the minister for that. Maybe she's the minister for promoting suicide, for promoting the prevalence of mental health. I don't know. This is the One Nation Tory party after all. So she tweeted that until COVID-19 vaccine is developed and made available to the public, society will have to adapt to a full lockdown. I think the full tweet is down here. Now, this is a response to it. I think Piers Morgan and another Sky News journalist came out saying, just trying to clarify what exactly she's saying. So journalists should stop asking about an exit strategy. There's only one way we can exit full lockdown, and that is when we have a vaccine. Until then, we need to find ways we can adapt society and strike a balance between the health of the nation and our economy. Now, not every country is doing this in the same way. Sweden is very much the outlier. Sweden is the maverick, is the rogue. So this is from a few weeks ago because the sentiment seems to have shifted on Sweden. Coronavirus in Sweden, why the largest country without any lockdown measures thinks this approach will pay off. Sweden will permit restaurants, bars, primary schools to remain open with gatherings of 500 people or more still allowed to take place. The UK mainstream media sentiment on Sweden seems to be shifting because if Sweden gets this right, it's going to be very damaging for every other nation, the low IQ governments, which have enforced a lockdown on a virus which probably has a infection fatality rate of somewhere around 0.1%. We talked about it in the previous video. So Telegraph coming out with this. Sweden has shown how not to tackle coronavirus as it fights now to save face. But does it need to save face? So data here from Statista. Coronavirus deaths worldwide per 100 million population as of 16th of April, which was yesterday at the time of making this video, by countries. So we have the countries most affected. So first of all, it's Spain, Belgium, Italy, France, United Kingdom, Netherlands, Switzerland. Then we have Sweden. So if we go over to here, the deaths per million, Sweden has 118 deaths per million of population. When you compare that to, say, the worst hit countries such as Spain, they have 402. Spain has a very well enforced government lockdown police state. There are armed police on the streets. I think you're not allowed to go more than a certain distance from your house. Very, very strict police state, George Orwell dystopian lockdown. Yet the deaths per million are many-fold higher than Sweden. So why is this? Now, I put this up on social media to get a little bit of a debate going yesterday, and people told me, look, the difference is Sweden's a small country. It's not that small. It's population 10 million. And they say, well, Sweden's it's a very, very big country, has a relatively small population. Basically, in Sweden, everybody just lives in the woods. Their nearest neighbor is a bear. You know, there's 3 people in Sweden called Sven, and they just live like 5,000 miles from each other. Not true. So this is from the World Bank. this is urban population, percentage of total population. Let's take a look at some different countries here. So we have the data here on the right is the percentage value of the total population that lives in an urban environment, aka in relatively close proximity to other people, not just three people called Sven living in a country the size of Russia. So anyway, we have France, who has a 80% of the population live in an urban environment. Italy, 70% of the population live in an urban environment. United Kingdom, 83%. And as you can see, in Sweden has the highest percentage of these countries. Belgium is actually very high, but Belgium's a tiny country, so I left that one out. Sweden has the highest percentage of people living in an urban environment out of these countries here, which are the main countries which are ahead of Sweden in terms of the death per million. Now, this is very interesting. So the less government encroaching methodology they are using in Sweden really seems to be paying dividends. The death rate per million is many times smaller. Now, people are saying, well, what about compare it to the other Scandinavian countries, right? Denmark, Finland, Norway. And now, yes, Sweden does have a higher death per million rate than Denmark, Finland, or Norway. However, wouldn't we expect this? If the virus is presumably spreading through Sweden quicker than the other Scandinavian countries, it doesn't mean that in the end the death rate in Denmark, Finland, or Norway will be less than Sweden. It just means Sweden is probably getting its deaths, it's getting over the hump sooner rather than later, right? And this is important because this is almost certainly going to preserve the Swedish economy much better than any kind of lockdown would. We've seen the data from the West. We've seen the unemployment rates coming out in the US and the UK. It's very bad, very, very bad. Bigger than the Great Depression in terms of bad. Society also preserved. Now there's things going around on social media and in the UK newspapers about people now getting divorce mediation through things like Zoom and Google Hangouts, because if you just lock people in a scenario they're not used to, divorce rates are going to go up. Domestic violence is going to go up. People are going to have breakdowns. So Sweden is avoiding all of this. And not only is it avoiding this, it seems to be doing relatively well in the death rate. I mean, it's quite a ways behind. So at this point, it's wrong to say Sweden has shown how not to tackle the coronavirus. If anything, it's shown how to do it very, very well. I'd love to know your thoughts and opinions on this one, guys. A lot of people were out to take Sweden down. Maybe a lot of it's because the Swedish population are, they're good. They're mostly good people, right? They kind of, it's quite a well-run society. People trust what the government says. So the government says, okay, look, we're not going to enforce a George Orwell kind of lockdown on you. But it's going to be sensible. If you have elderly relatives, keep your distance from them. If someone is infected, stay within your house. People kind of listen to that in Sweden. So it's a very great country, one of the best countries in the world, right? Sweden. But it's just interesting anyway. Don't believe the hype. There's some research coming out now that the lockdown does almost nothing actually to prevent the spread of the virus. That's some of the new research coming out, and also research that indicates only a certain percentage of the population is actually susceptible to getting coronavirus. It's quite interesting anyway. So Sweden, protecting their economy, protecting society, not imposing some kind of draconian lockdown on their population. Interesting one anyway. Don't believe the hype. Italy, France, UK, all having much higher deaths per million than Sweden. And even in Sweden, more people live in an urban environment. Who would have thought? Jason from Liberty Bunker sign off. Drop me some comments if you want to. It's quite an interesting video, I thought, and I'll see you in the next video.